welcome back. I was told that you need to. So we're closing out our session, our event today with a pretty exciting panel. So as you take your seats, I'll do some very brief introductions, and then Robert, our moderator, will take it away. Oh, okay, hold on. I think that there's going to be a competition for who looked best in that. I think it's me, but you guys. So, joining us on this panel, again, moderator is Robert Luke, CEO of eCampusOntario. To my immediate left is Robert Greenwood, the Deputy Minister of Rural and Regional Development and Engagement and Chief Economic Development Officer for the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. Both? To Robert's left is Mary Butler, the President and CEO of New Brunswick Community College, followed by Michael Crowe, Vice President Academic at Bow Valley College, and finally Michael Burt, Vice President of the Conference Board of Canada. Robert, take it away.
Thank you so much, Amrit, and thank you, Robert, Mary, Michael, and Michael for being here today. I believe in Newfoundlanding terms we have a yaffle of Michaels.
Very good, Robert.
Because in the pre-call we had Michael Crowbach on that as well, so 3 Michaels, 2 Roberts, and a Mary. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to have this conversation with you because we've had a lot of conversations over the last 2 days. So we started big. We went deep into productivity and the economy. We've heard lots of great things about some of the practical ways in which people are standing up micro-credentials in order to meet the needs. And I was just saying, the end of our exploring is to arrive from where we started and know it for the first time. So on that note, Michael Burt, I'm going to set the stage here with talking a little bit about challenges and opportunities. And I know that you did some work recently at the conference board on the macroeconomic trends. So let's start with the macroeconomic trends, and then I'm going to turn to our panelists to talk about how they translate the macro to the micro.
Sounds great. How much time do we have?
It's Friday. It's 4, so you tell me.
So I think probably most relevant for this audience would be what's going on in the labor force. And if I can pick 3 big macro trends.
Microphone close.
Close, got it. Okay. So number 1, obviously big changes in immigration policy in Canada. Last 3 years, we brought in 3 million people into this country. If the federal government's plan goes ahead as proposed, we would actually see 700,000 people on net leave the country over the next couple of years. Huge change in a very short period of time. We actually don't even believe that that'll happen because it would cause a recession, to be frank. So in our forecasts, we actually see flat growth, but even, so no change in population, but even in that situation, it's a huge change from rapid growth in labor force to actually some contraction in the labor force. And you add into that demographics. Just an artifact of how many kids were born 25 years ago, but the number of kids in that 18 to 24 year age cohort will actually shrink by 250,000 people in Canada over the next 5 years. So that's all of those kids going into our post-secondary programs. And so fewer international students, fewer domestic students, big challenge for our post-secondary sector. And I guess the last thing, can't be an economist and not talk about our friends south of the border. It's a mug's game trying to figure out what the heck Trump is going to do, I'll be honest, but I will say this. In our opinion, really what he's trying to do is shift investment south of the border. He wants businesses to be in the US, not somewhere else. And so we're already seeing some of that taking place. Businesses saying we're not going to invest in Canada, we're going to invest in the US. What does that mean? It means the demands for our labor force will change over the next 4 or 5 years. So our industry mix will change, the demand for different skills, different roles will change, and whatever happens with tariffs, I think that will be true.
On that bright note,
we call it the dismal science for a reason.
Yeah, no kidding. Appreciate that. So let's, Michael Crowe, let's turn to you, because what I'm really interested to hear, Michael and Mary, you're both, they're executive leaders of organizations, post-secondary organizations, 2 of the best in the country, outside of Ontario, and I'm really interested in what these economic data mean to you and how you are going to react to those and or change your model. So talk about that, Michael.
Yeah, sure, thanks. By the way, Robert, a huge thank you to you and eCampusOntario for hosting this important conversation these last couple of days. I think the conversation has just been incredible and important and timely. And I've just so enjoyed the presentations and the topics that were discussed, and I'm kind of inspired at everything that's happening across the country to innovate around these upskilling and reskilling challenges. So I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed being here, and thank you to eCampusOntario.
Well, thank you for coming.
I love economists. I love their optimism, and I love the data that kind of supports that optimism. And I think, in some of the challenges that Michael's talking about, there's so much opportunity for higher ed. And, I just think it's just a great time to be in the upskilling and reskilling space. Every single one of the issues that you talked about, I see as a bit of an opportunity, yeah, for sure. You look at those 3 million new Canadians that have come through immigration channels, and there's a huge percentage of them have experience and skills and credentials from other countries, and we need their talent and their ability, and but there's some gaps in our systems that I think create some opportunities for higher ed. Not only just recognizing credentials that they bring with them, and not just preparing them for licensure here in Canada with Canadian professional associations and those kinds of things, but in truly bridging those individuals into the workplace. And I think there's a lot of innovative models. We heard about some of them these last couple of days that can do that efficiently and effectively. They involve mentorship, they involve competency-based assessments, they involve gap training, and they involve partnership with industry that create pathways to employment. And I think there's a huge opportunity. We talk about, well, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, some of the impacts of the IRCC changes on higher ed and the international student situation. But you look at the newcomers to Canada and the 3 million people that are sitting there ready to contribute to some of the issues that you've described. And I hope higher ed can step up and kind of meet the challenge. You talked about some of the demographic trends. And I think we heard a couple of examples of this earlier today where we're coming up with some really innovative training options that are very strongly aligned to what industry is looking for. But then we can't fill the seats, right? I think that happens time and time again. And, I think we might see a shrinking demographic with recent high school graduates in the next 5 years across the country. But I think what we need to pay more attention to is the existing workforce, which is an aging workforce, and which is in constant need of upskilling and reskilling. And so I think if higher ed can shift its focus a little bit away from that traditional high school market and more to a much larger workforce that requires upskilling and reskilling, I think there's tremendous opportunity. So I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent. Mary, what do you see in New Brunswick?
Thank you, Robert, and thank you to all of you troopers who on a Friday afternoon are sticking with it right till the end. We're a purpose-driven organization, like I'm sure many of you are, and so the things that drive our behavior and the transformation initiatives that we have underway at NBCC are the things impacting the people we serve. And so when we think about employers, you can go back 5 years and you're going to see stats that say anywhere from 65 to 75% of employers surveyed cite labor shortages as their primary challenge. The thing that's prohibiting them from growing, expanding their business, being more competitive, expanding service and product offerings, because they just don't have the labor supply that they need. And then when I think about our province, we're faced with some pretty stark realities. We have the lowest post-secondary education attainment in the country. The OECD commissioned a report on the percentage of jobs at risk of disruption due to automation and technological advancement, and New Brunswick had the highest percentage of jobs at higher significant risk. In some cases, meaning it's not even a matter of upskilling, you have to go and completely reskill. Nearly a third of our working age population is set to retire. We have 133,000 job vacancies coming up. 40% of those require some form of college education or apprenticeship. And 46% of those, because of the demographic challenges, are expected to come from outside of New Brunswick. And then if we think about people, Michael and his great work, this week they released a new consumer confidence index report, and it's had one of the biggest declines it's had in a year and a half. And the primary thing that troubled people was their financial state. They see it deteriorating. They don't see it getting better in the next little while. And the next thing that jumped out was many of them felt that there were few job prospects in the future. And so those are the stakeholders we serve. Employers, and I say people, not students, because I think we need to get out of that mindset that they're all coming from high school. A large amount do, but we serve all ages. And then the labor market that we serve on behalf of the province. So what we like to say is those are the critical challenges facing us today, but they do not have to define our future. So I'll stop there for now.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, Mary. I think it's worth us thinking, as you brought it up, Michael, Burt, you brought it up already, that we have a system that's designed for 18 to 24-year-olds, and that's the minority of learners in the country today. So, Robert, I'm from Saskatchewan. Newfoundland would be my second home if I was going to live anywhere else in this country, because they love people from Saskatchewan, so that means I love them. You have a very unique role in Newfoundland as the Deputy Minister of Economic Development. Can you talk a little bit about what these kind of economic data mean to reskilling, upskilling, and post-secondary education in Newfoundland and Labrador?
Sure, yeah. I was at Memorial University for 20 years, and I had been in government prior to that in Saskatchewan for 5 years.
I thought you were okay.
And I was born just up the road here when North York, I don't think it's part of Toronto now, and lived in Richmond Hill, so I feel very at home here. But Newfoundland is actually home. And when I left Memorial a year and a half ago, I went into provincial government. I'm not in a line department administering programs with the minister breathing down my neck. I'm too old for that. I'm in executive council, so the premier now leaving, I had no impact on that, is my minister. And my role really is whole of government and not to get in the way of stuff that's happening. And there's loads of great economic activity happening in our province as elsewhere. But, and many of the things that have been brought up already are critical challenges. And I'm really fixated on demographics and labor market. I've done a lot of work with the OECD over the years, and they have a project now called Shrinking Smartly and Sustainably. I think it's 8 of the 38 OECD countries now have dropping population. More join that club every year. Fertility rates are dropping around the world. So the war on talent is just beginning, and it's not going to reverse. And so Newfoundland, Labrador, we all know different regions have different challenges. And so we're in the big smoke here, large urban by Canadian standards. There's rural adjacent to urban. There's rural non-adjacent, where most of rural Canada is. And there's rural remote. Traditional rural Canada, farming, fishing, forestry. Rural remote is even bigger and bigger challenges. Economic opportunity everywhere, but employers can't find workers. In rural Newfoundland today, and this is such an about face. I'm the tail end of the baby boom. I've been waiting for all of them to retire. I became a deputy at 62. I did have opportunities. I turned it down. But that's the reality. And David Foote, we remember the demographer, the python swallowing the pig. And the boomers are the pig. And of course, they were the most privileged generation ever on the face of the earth. And I'm one of them. They are disappearing from the labor force. So we have firms in rural Newfoundland today that are viable, successful, that are closing because they can't get workers. And so for me, labor market strategy How do you connect supply and demand? We've had a lot of talk about that, and love to talk more with this bunch and you. But the flip side of the coin for me, and I'll circle back to the beginning of the conference, is productivity. And I consider my discipline political economy. I don't do the math. And I respect the people who do. But productivity, for me, has always been really critically important. Kind of stuff economists worry about. It's counting angels on the heads of pins. Lots of macro stuff. And that has what am I going to do about that? Well, for me in my work, and I'll wind up quickly and then see where we go from here. Productivity, it's kind of like the Moneyball analogy, if you follow that. There was a movie on it. You're way better at getting singles and doubles every day than home runs. That's how you win. And I think we have a fixation in this country on big, sexy initiatives. Instead, we've got to roll up our sleeves and work with all the SMEs and larger firms, and we've had some good examples here, and deliver every day on technology, on processes like lean, and on upskilling with micro-credentials, and meet the employers, meet the workers where they are. Yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I'm reminded of a Colleges Ontario report from, it's got to be 15 or 18 years ago. It was called People Without Jobs and Jobs Without People, which is a nice turn of phrase. It's an anti-metabole for those of you who study rhetoric. That's what it's called. But let's talk about this, about meeting the needs of businesses, because I've been pretty impressed with everybody talking today and yesterday about how they're doing that. And Mary and Michael, I want to ask you specifically about some initiatives that you've been working on that are meeting the needs of businesses. Give us an example of what's working and what you learned from that. Mary, let's start with you, please.
Well, at MBCC, our goal, when we looked at the part of our population, nearly 40% of our working age population had a high school diploma or less. And when we dug into what was prohibiting them from either trying and succeeded in post-secondary or not even attempting it at all, one of the primary barriers was occupational. They just didn't know the jobs available and the pathway to get them. And particularly for the underrepresented groups in our province, there are some systemic issues that have to be addressed, barriers that have to be broken down, in addition to connecting the dots between where they are and the job that they want to have. So we developed this concept where we thought, wouldn't it be great if there was this hub where every single New Brunswicker knew the skills and competencies that they had. They were validated through authentic assessment by a trusted source like MBCC, and they could see how well that measured up to various job opportunities available to them. And whether they were 50% qualified or 75%, they could see where their gaps were and the pathway to get it. We would help connect the dots for them. So that's the journey we've been on, which meant a complete overhaul of all of our curriculum, which we're just finishing this year, and delivering it in such a way that we're creating, we call it more on and off ramps, right? So if you look at the Trans-Canada Highway that goes from coast to coast to coast, I think we should throw in one more coast to coast, anyway, all the way from Newfoundland across the country. The Trans-Canada serves many people, tens of, probably hundreds of thousands, millions a day. I don't know what their count is, maybe Michael does, but tons. But it doesn't reach every single community, right? We need all those provincial roads and municipal roads to help people get where they are. And so back to what Robert was saying about meeting people where they are, we can't just continue to do post-secondary the way we always have, that there's one way to do it. Well, because while it did serve a lot of people well, it left far too many people out. And so our job is to create the on and off ramps, those flexible pathways to do things differently so that we reach people where they are. And I'll bottom line it for you. Life happens. I want every interaction with MBCC to have a return on investment for learners. So when life happens and you can't finish or you're delayed and have to go back, you don't leave shouldered with debt and nothing to your name. Darn it, well, I tried, I spent a year there, I'm still paying off my debt, and you have no certificate, no parchment to show for it. If we reconstruct our programs the way we have, so that we can package it in micro-credentials, certificates, and diplomas. We create that true portfolio development, right? That stackability that allows people to have a return on that investment, no matter how small or how big it is. So that's our big, hairy goal for, I don't like using that
That's
word.
some
but that's it.
radical change, Mary. I'm going to come back to that because you've put some pretty key things on the table, knowing the skills and competencies and flexible pathways. So we'll keep those in mind. But Michael, let's hear about your example.
Yeah, sure. The one that comes to mind for me is the work that we're doing in the Pivot Ed space, which is kind of an upskilling and reskilling initiative that's happening at the college. We've been working on this for 5 or 6 years. The story started in Calgary during an oil and gas bust. In that sector's boom and bust, and some years, well, you know the story, right? And oil had dipped. I think there was even a time, pandemic, maybe just pre-pandemic. Remember when the Suez Canal got blocked? Yeah. Oil actually dipped into the negatives for a time, and there was huge displacement of workers in Calgary, trained professionals with tons of experience, right? Geologists, engineers, and mass layoffs in that sector. And at the same time in Calgary, there was this tech sector boom and lots of technology jobs, and they couldn't find talent, right? They couldn't fill positions, and their businesses were growing, and they didn't have access to people. And what was that report you referred to? That was playing out in Calgary, where there were people without jobs and jobs without people. And so we thought, well, what if we could come up with a model that allowed us to fast track some training, and that's where Pivot Ed came from. We're going to pivot them from an oil and gas career into something new and emerging in the tech sector. And so we thought we thought a few things. That these are professional people with lots of experience, lots of skills. They probably don't need to start on day one of class in our technology programs, right? And so we kind of started designing a new model, and we tried to be really creative around it. Everything we did was employer driven. So our subject matter experts for designing the training programs were the tech industry employers themselves. So they helped develop the skills, the competency profiles that we wanted to work with. All of the training that we provided was competency based, meaning that through life and work experience and other education, if somebody had the competency and they could demonstrate that, awesome, they got credit for that and they just moved on. So we only trained on gaps, so that really accelerated the training time and the time to competency. We did assessment first so that we could determine what those gaps were. So instead of taking a test at the end of learning, we took it at the beginning. And if they knew the content, they got credit. Anyway, so the training was highly customized for the employer, but highly personalized for the learner. And everybody had a different path depending on what their competencies were. And it was hugely successful. We transitioned over 200 displaced oil and gas workers into jobs in the tech sector. So since then we've been kind of refining the model, and it's plug and play. We can use it in any sector, in any jurisdiction. We've deployed it in health and manufacturing and the banking sector, HR sector, and the hospitality and hotel sector. So it's kind of been a fun story. The thing that I like best about it, though, last comment on this, is everything that we're producing in this space, we white label it. And so that means it's available to anybody. You can brand it your own. You can deploy it in your own region to meet your own workforce needs. And we're hoping, the theme of this panel, I think, is this ecosystem conversation. We're hoping that these regional hubs that all of us are part of can elevate into more of a national strategy around upskilling and reskilling. So that's the vision.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for both of those examples. I want to turn to you, Michael, and then Robert, I'm going to come back to you for some economics and some political economy to add to the flavor. So we've heard about some really great examples of how these two leading colleges are standing up industry-focused programs yet there's still a mismatch. So what's missing? This sounds to me like a perfect economics puzzle because it's an efficiency argument. So what do you think, Michael?
Well, it sounds like they're already doing what we need to do, to be perfectly honest. I mean, part of this is around, I'm speaking to a micro-credential audience, so this is probably not that earth-shattering, but it's about changing how we deliver. We've seen huge changes in the workforce in the last 5 years, pandemic, bust, then boom. Now we're in a different phase again after a population boom and what's going on with south of the border. Takeaway is, it's very, very hard to say that, let's make a change and it's going to have an impact 3 or 5 years down the road, because by then the game will have moved somewhere else. So how do we create programs that are highly responsive, that adapt quickly to the changing needs? And I'd say the other thing is, how do we scale programs that are good and effective, but not at the level we need them to be? Probably the best example of this I could give would be, there's a widely acknowledged nursing shortage in this country. Our estimates are, right now in Canada, to meet the excess vacancies, we need to increase the number of nursing graduates out of every program in the country by 50% to close that gap right now. And that's a multi-year challenge we're going to have to address. So how do we scale the programs we've got to close that gap as quickly as we possibly can?
Kind of sounds like we should get started now, so hopefully nobody has plans for the weekend. Robert, let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in Newfoundland. I'm really interested to share with the folks here, because you're forming the clutch between these two gears in a way that I think is quite unique, that also is complementary here. Care to comment on that?
Sure, and I've done stuff around regional economic development innovation for years. I don't consider myself a labor market expert, but of necessity in my role, and when I talk about some of what I've already said here and what we've heard, to me it's kind of mind-numbing or mind-blowing or frustrating or something that we talk about the ecosystem. That's an analogy. And ecosystems to me kind of sound like biology, and stuff kind of regulates and evolves and dies or thrives. For human ecosystems, we like to pretend we have some degree of control or coordination or thoughtful engagement. And so in my role in Executive Council, I don't have big budget like the line departments. I do have some suasion, influence, and convening power. And many of the players in this room have convening power. And I think what's unbelievably missing, I've stopped throwing in all the descriptors, is getting business and labor and education and training, K-12 and post-secondary, and governments in rooms together on a systematic, regular, facilitated basis. And we've heard some examples of it over the last couple of days. But as far as I can see, I talked to a lady just finishing her PhD at U of T on labor market strategy in Ontario. And she's tracked all these mechanisms that have existed, and some still exist on paper. And almost none of it is working. Like, not even working because we're trying and it didn't work. We're not trying. I can't believe it's, I am, so in my role, I am proactively getting the silos in government talking to each other. So I have steering committees on labor market, on productivity, on rural regional development capacity. And some of the bureaucrats, they're all smart, hardworking, good people. Well, there's a bell curve, but most are fairly high on the bell curve. But government is
This
not...
is being webcast, just FYI.
Friday afternoon, get out the beer. Government's not an easy place to work. Ministers, politicians, Donald Savoy has written about it in Ottawa. Newfoundland, Labrador is no different, and it's smaller. And so people, speaking truth to power doesn't exist like we like to believe it does in government, seemingly anywhere anymore. And yet, when you get people in a room together, Facilitation 101, basic old SWOT analysis, the passion and creativity and commitment explodes. And that's been my experience over the last year and a half in government, and then bringing together business and labor and community. And there's a load of people doing a load of work. I'm just the excuse to call the meetings. And I think we need way more of that. And I had a good discussion with your boss, the president of Conference Board, a couple of days ago. We need more national mechanisms in conversation. We need it at the provincial level, but we absolutely need it at the sub-provincial level, because labor markets exists, unless you're PEI, sub-provincial. We're big geography in this country. So that's kind of what I think I'm doing, if that is where you wanted to go.
I do. It's a great segue, because let's talk a little bit about some national collaboration. Now, Jim Balsillie recently said we're all economic nationalists now. Michael, you talked about at the outset of the fact that we're going to be consistently trolled by our neighbor to the south about tariffs, I think, for at least the next 4 years. I'm not optimistic that it will end then, actually. I think that this is the new norm. So I want to set up this talk then, Mary, you also mentioned this about national collaboration. I'm just going to point out, by the way, we are the only OECD country without a national minister of education. I know what you're going to say. Education is a provincial, thank you, whoever said it's provincial. So is health. Last time I checked, we had a minister of health. So maybe, I don't know, Amrit, are you looking for a job? You for national minister of education.
Does the U.S. still have one?
I'm not even quite sure if they have a minister of health at all, actually, or, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. How's the internet doing today? So national collaboration, how can we, so we've heard some really good examples of integration. We've heard about PivotEd, we've heard about the great work you're doing in New Brunswick, Mary. How can we scale or unite these regional initiatives? How can we leverage these commonalities? What are the three things that we should be doing today and tomorrow to start standing up better models? How can we take PivotEd to the rest of the country? But Mary, let's start with you.
Already 3. Obviously, you're wanting me to go fast. Okay.
No, to take all the time in the world. You could be 10.
No, I guess for me, one of the things that we're already doing is when we started down this journey, I'll just say it wasn't as quick a trip as I thought it would be. But it's worth taking the time if you're going to transform your model. And we questioned even using the word transform and transformative transformation at the beginning. But that is the right word, because we are transforming. But that means you have to go back to your foundation. If anybody read Clayton Christensen's work, the reason so many new ventures fail is because they're stuck inside institutions or organizations that are structured around one thing. And that's what we have to think about in post-secondary. If we're going to change, how do our policy structures and everything else either accelerate or prohibit that change? And so those are some hard lessons we've learned, and it's taken us longer. All that to say in terms of collaboration, in Atlantic Canada, we believe a rising tide lifts all boats. So from the beginning, we've been open, and this authentic competency evaluation that we talk about really resonates with our 7 publicly funded colleges in Atlantic Canada, and we're all partnering together and looking to advance this because there's more power in the collective in terms of strength, speed, scalability, agility, adaptability, all of those things when we're working together. And we've started conversations with Bow Valley. We work with other partners in the private sector, in post-secondary, in the public sector, and I think that's key. If there's anything we can learn from the conversations lately, look at what the threat of tariffs has prompted. Questions about interprovincial trade barriers, right? How that has cost us more money, makes our businesses less competitive, and it increases the prices to the consumers. Well, why in post-secondary are we doing that? My goodness, not even between provinces, but within a province. We set up barriers between institutions. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound student-focused to me. And I know everyone in this room, if asked, would say they are a student-focused leader. That's why we do what we do. We're passionate about education. We're passionate about serving learners. The whole reason we're on this hard journey to change things instead of just sit back is because we know that's what our learners need. So why are we continuing with institutional policies that create barriers for learners instead of widening access and truly living the continuum of learning, lifelong learning, by making that mobility between institutions, across provinces, easier and seamless? That's certainly what we're going to be working towards.
That's inspirational. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Yeah, love what Mary's talking about, and I think those are key priorities. Robert, I'm going to though focus a little bit on something you taught me a few years ago. So Robert talks about our current model in post-secondary in the context of a 12th century model, largely, that's trying to solve 21st century problems. And he calls it the 1221 dilemma. And I love thinking about this. And you know, when you think about our higher ed sector, it's super traditional, right? And it's based on hours and credits and credentials and cohorts and 2-year programs and 4-year programs and the degree and you're done. And it doesn't match up at all with what the needs of the workforce is today, the 21st century. And so we've got this gap, right? And when you talk about provincial jurisdiction for higher ed, they have jurisdiction over the 12th century model, right? Where they control credits and hours and approvals and 18 months to get something to market. And let them have it, I say. There's absolutely room for a national conversation around upskilling and reskilling, putting industry first, making sure that we have a workforce with the skills they need to grow our businesses right across the country. Most of that so far has been in the non-credit space, although we're seeing examples of these things scaling into the credit space. And the provincial governments who are in the 12th century are kind of stuck on, they don't want to touch non-credit. If it's something really innovative in the credit space, they're nervous about it. And so I think there is room for a federal conversation that actually addresses these key strategies. And the 3 things for me would be a national skills framework. Our provincial jurisdictions, they communicate this in the context of a credential framework. And those tend, in my opinion, to be fragmented. And they're difficult. They don't really speak to skills or competencies at all. And they're difficult for learners and employers to navigate. So I think there is room at a national level to talk about a skills or competency framework that's aligned to the labor market. I think a second opportunity for a national conversation is around data and accessibility and visibility of data. I think we're making huge advances, and you know, Austin from Lightcast is here. You know, there's a great example of, you know, how we're using AI to increase visibility and accessibility to real-time data, and I think there's room in our national conversation for that. And then the last one is just there's room for national investment in some of the scalable regional solutions that we've been learning about the last couple of days. And I think if the national investment can scale these regional solutions, we'll start having a national conversation. The interesting thing for me, the big problems we're trying to solve around productivity and profitability and employability, they're national problems, but they're solved at the regional level. And so if we can learn from the regions and scale that to the national conversation, I think we'll be able to make a difference.
That's fantastic. I'll just connect a few dots here, and then Michael and then Robert, I'm going to bring it back to you to talk about that. We heard from ESDC yesterday, David was here, who talked about the job bank, and they are experimenting with a national framework, and their preferred model is to network regional solutions. So I think there's a significant opportunity there. We, as you know, operate the official Ontario upskilling platform, the micro-credentials portal. That currently provides 80% of the micro-credentials available off the job bank. And I was newly astonished to see them say yesterday that last year they had 90 million hits on their website. And I'm pretty sure, I said this earlier today, but it was segmented to Canadian data. So they are a good candidate to do that.
Yeah, it's a great start. There's lots of examples of some of these things starting, and I think we just need a little more coordination around all of this. For sure.
I'm going to go to Robert then to talk about coordination. So Robert, you're doing this on the Newfoundland level. How would that scale? How would that coordination scale across the country?
Well, I think, as you were speaking, so I want to answer a different question first.
That's
going into politics soon. That's a joke. Understanding the labor market is a challenge, and this relates to the data, and it relates to qualitative and quantitative. So there's a lot of great work being done by a lot of people and using AI with available data on available formal occupations, skills, professions. As we have a labor shortage, we're realizing there's significant segments of human labor not showing up in the data. And I'd love to hear from the conference board if any economists are doing serious work on the informal economy, the underground economy. If you want to hire a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician in Newfoundland, unless you go through a large company for a large project, and I would bet it's the same everywhere, you're paying cash under the table.
Nobody does that ever in this country. It's
Now,
all done
tell me I'm wrong.
legitimately.
And everybody plays that game. There is more money in the economy than we know because of that type of circulation. And so I think we need to be factoring, and maybe it's more rural than urban, but I doubt it. Maybe it's the opposite. So one of the challenges I'm wrestling with is we have a great Newfoundland Stats Agency. It's a StatsCan focal point. The college system has data. The university has data. Government departments have administrative data. Again, no one is connecting the information. There are data experts, and the odd economist who actually can connect with humans, but getting good infographics. One simple little thing that my shop has done, working with Newfoundland Stats, and apparently in Ottawa it's all the rage these days. When I started, you used to have thick documents you had to read. Then when Paul Martin was there, it all went to PowerPoints, right? Decks. Now it's a placemat. We want everything on a single page placemat with pretty pictures. Well, if that's what we need with our iPhone fixated short-term capability, and so we now have 6 placemats we've done in the last few, on productivity, on labor market, on the economy, just understanding sectors. We do allow, there's tons of data, tons of reports. Most normal humans and people who own firms don't understand it because it hasn't been presented in an easy to digest way. So that's some of what I'm doing, Robert, is just pulling together the people who really know stuff. And we had 3 workshops, one on labor market, one on each of the productivity, and had the experts talk about what are the key things that are actually happening, what are the gaps, where do we need more information, and how do we fill it? So I don't know if I'm answering the question at all. I don't know how we begin on any of this conversation unless we solve what I just said.
I think you're answering the question that needed to be asked, which I should have asked, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But you've kind of thrown down the gauntlet to the economist on the on the panel. So I'm not sure what question I would. Here's what I would say. So we're talking placemats. Robert has set the table. What do you say to that?
Placemats. I would agree that there is a knowledge translation mobilization challenge for sure. We're in the labor market information space. Look, I can rattle off stats to you until the cows come home. How do I convey what you need to know in a way that you understand it is something we struggle with all the time. What I might say is a couple of things, because you're talking about nationalism. I mean, first of all, I'll double click on what you were saying, Mary, about like the interprovincial trade barriers. It's still shocking to me that some provincially regulated professions, their credentials aren't recognized across provincial borders like that.
Ontario now recognizes nursing credentials from other jurisdictions like Alberta.
that's a good start. So, but like I guess what I'm trying to say is like that would be a good first step. Beyond that, to get back to the knowledge mobilization thing, I think, I mean, we're trying to do that with some of the tools that we create, some of the things, I mean, a tool we have around LMI is Opportunext. It's a tool that we've got. It's just a simple tool, but we created it through engagement with users to understand what information they needed, but it's really around that understanding what the need is, when they need it, how they need it, and creating that information set for them. The other thing I'd do just quickly is a quick plug for our partnership we have with TMU around the Future Skills Center. And over the last 6 years, we've been involved in about 200 plus projects all across the country. I mean, a core part of the mandate with FSC is to get knowledge mobilization around what's working, what's not. I cannot sum up 200 projects in a minute, but what I will say is there's many projects all across the country, different regions, different industries, tackling many different problems. We're trying to get the word out, but certainly would encourage you to have a look at their site to see maybe something that has worked somewhere else may work in your community.
Fantastic. Future Skills Center has done an amazing job actually on convening a lot of tables and conversations like this around what it means to build this kind of connected skills-based ecosystem. We're almost out of time, but I just want to see if there's any questions from the audience before I do a rapid fire. Here's one right here. Do we have a microphone? I mean, I can run one.
Thank you. So thank you for your information. So talking about collaboration all over the country. So we know that there is labor shortage in some places and other places there is unemployment. Is there a way to create a model where we can have this flow of workforce from, for example, Ontario to other provinces where they need that kind of labor and, for example, international students or new students or unemployed people, and get colleges in those provinces, for example, in New Brunswick, they need people in technology. And colleges there can provide micro-credentials so that they can bridge the gap and get those people ready for employment in this province. Can we create that kind of model? Because, as you mentioned, there are people without jobs and jobs without people. So we need to work as a country, as one country, so that we can bridge this gap and utilize the maximum of resources we have so that we can strive as a country.
Great question. Who would like to answer that first? Robert.
First cut, but I'm sure my colleagues will jump in. I think there's a load of that already happening. We have thousands of workers from Atlantic Canada going to Alberta.
Alberta is calling.
Back and forth constantly. We also have hundreds, if not thousands, of workers from elsewhere in Canada going to Newfoundland for major projects. The flow, physical flow, Barb Neese at Memorial did a great research project on people long-distance commuting. Of course, we know with online, there are people commuting in all directions every day from their home. But I also think we need much better systems at the sub-provincial level of connecting the people who are looking for jobs and the people who are looking for workers, because they can be right down the road from each other and they don't know exist. There's websites, there's experts, there's offices of they're not talking to each other. We're horrible at basic communications.
Which is one of the top human skills that is generally cited as most needed by businesses. Causation or correlation? Michael?
What do I want to add to that? I mean...
You can disagree.
No, I totally agree. I mean, at some point you said it's the problem around, there's jobs without people and people without jobs. How do we solve that problem? I mean, that's the vision for the future. We often say in our work that the labor market's going to be permanently tighter going forward than it's been historically. That means we need to make the best use of the people we have. And so how do you create those communication vehicles? I think there's lots of people trying, but I think we haven't found the the killer app yet to address it. So.
Pivot Ed might be that killer app.
Well, I was thinking about some of the work that Mary's shop and ours are starting to do. And, if it's an educational question, like one of the things I think that has to improve is the efficiency of our delivery and the cost of delivery. It's too expensive, right? And it's not sustainable. And our 12th century models aren't sustainable. We're seeing that with the international student changes and the impact that that's having on institutions. If we can share training resources more freely and more readily, and we have a national network that's connected and able to do that, not only do we bring down the cost, but we also increase the speed to market. And we can solve a workforce challenge in any region if we're interconnected that way. So I agree with the comments about the need to convene, and I agree there's a lot of missed opportunity just up and down the street. But if we do have this national network that's established, things can flip between regions pretty quickly, and we become a lot better at addressing some of the current challenges we're seeing.
It occurs to me that it's likely easier for Alberta and New Brunswick to collaborate than it is for a college and university that might be in the same city, for example. We have 8 here. But Mary, what do you think?
But why is that?
Human
Where is
nature?
protectionism getting us? It's making us very susceptible to the big external influences that are coming our way. I think we'd be much better if we band together. I look at an example of what you're talking about is harmonization nationally for apprenticeship, right? If we could do the same across finance, health, IT, look at, practice sector tables, looking sector-wide at those competencies and levels of learning, and lock that in for some of the core skills. There will always be room for micro-credentials or postgraduate certificates or whatever it is for niche skill development, but we could come together a lot more than we do. Think of how much each of our institutions spend on oversight and maintenance of those programs, maintaining them, keeping them relevant, quality assuring them. And we have so many, right? So I think there's, to Michael's point, it's unsustainable. And we have to look at things differently. And I don't think it should be a matter of whether you're neighbors in the post-secondary market or across the country from one another, because when I'm asked who my biggest competitor is, I don't think about my neighbors in post-secondary, and I've got several in the same city with me, co-located. I think about on-the-job training or a job period, because my finances are so tight and I've got to support my family, right? There are lots of other things competing for choice than the institution next door.
That's really well said, and I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for the Canadian Coalition of Affordable Learning, which is my good friend and colleague Carly McDougall is here somewhere from Campus Manitoba, and BC Campus, Atlantic OER, Colleges and Institutes Canada have banded together to look at ways that we could share open educational resources, micro-credential digital transformation across the country as one way to support affordable learning. So I think that's a great call to action. I'll see if there's maybe one more question. We have one more?
We have a question from online.
The internet.
Yes. Someone asks, do we have a summary of facts and data online on what type of jobs are there that have been floating in job ads and have not been filled? Could you share an example what those types of jobs are or in what industry?
Anyone?
If I understand the question, I think it's around kind of where these persistent gaps are. Actually, we got a paper coming out on that in a couple of weeks, but
It'll be on the internet.
The gaps change over time, to be honest. So it's hard to say like what persists, but I'd say the ones that have really stood out consistently for the last 3-4 years have been a lot of roles in the healthcare sector and a lot of roles in skilled trades. Very consistently, year after year after year, there's job postings and people aren't filling them. Those would be, I think, the biggest areas.
Thank you. Robert?
And I would add, based on my work in Newfoundland, but I suspect it's since the pandemic and with the labor shortages and some of the challenges with workforce now, hospitality and restaurants and tourism sector. Newfoundland tourism is a big draw. Finding workers on a seasonal basis is really tough. Another factor I wanted to mention earlier, and I don't know how this is showing up in all these great data sources. Organized labor is a massively important piece of the puzzle, but many, many jobs of skilled trades for major projects don't get advertised. They are done through the union system. And there's well-established protocols, but they're not showing up in a lot of our data. So we need to get much better at understanding all that. And again, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you are. The economist might, but I don't. Michael.
He probably will. I agree with all of the sectors that have been listed. I just wanted to share an anecdote from the hotel and hospitality sector. So in Alberta, we have a labor market data portal called Skill Up. And it's really good. It shows kind of top 10 highest demand sectors at any given time where there's the most vacancy. The hospitality and tourism sector is always one or two, mostly one, with hundreds and hundreds of job vacancies all the time. And we've been meeting with that sector to try and address that gap. And there's a relatively large unemployed population in the city of Calgary who could do that work. The educational requirements for most of those positions are flexible, right? We don't require degrees or college diplomas. So in fact, often they don't require any kind of formal training. But what the association has discovered is that people who are looking for jobs don't feel confident about taking those jobs, even without academic qualification requirements, because they haven't had any training. And so we can develop these really short, targeted training modules so they just have a little more confidence in their ability to do that work and start filling those positions. So this notion of convening and having the conversation within your community to solve the problems that exist in your community is a really powerful idea, and that's just one example.
I really like that because that's what your anecdote, Michael, is giving people the skills they need and the credentials they want. So Mary, I'm going to say, give the last word to you, and I can ask you a question and you can answer it or not. But how can those of us in the room today or tuning in online get involved? What should they be doing when they come to work on Monday?
Wow, that's a really deep question. I think it's an openness to change. The one thing that we sort of hammer home all the time at NBCC is to challenge our assumptions, because so much of what we do is based on past habit and practice and what we know and what we've experienced personally. So I think that the thing that we can do most is be curious, really interrogate the data, understand it. The data alone doesn't give you the information. It might tell you something's high or low, but why? What drives it? What change is required? What problem are we trying to solve before we just start throwing jelly at the wall, right? We don't have infinite pools of resources. So how do we really be curious and intentional about understanding the challenges we face, what in fact will move the needle, making sure we monitor that we are, the changes we're making are having the intended effect. And I can only say, and I'll give a shout out, that's unfair to my colleagues here, but I'll give a shout out to my team, because honestly, we've weathered some pretty intense storms in the last few years, as have all of you, in terms of the pandemic and then the IRCC changes, which are ongoing. And we would not be positioned to not only survive but thrive coming out of each of these if it hadn't been for the foundational work that our teams have been doing for years. And so I encourage you not to look at these changes as an add-on to your work, not something to add to your workload, but a fundamental shift in how you do your work every day and how we serve the communities and the learners that we work with.
I love that. Thank you. That's a great note to end on. I want to thank you all for being here to share your thoughts as we wrap up this year's Microcredential Forum. I want to thank everybody here for staying for this fantastic and engaging panel. So Robert, Mary, Michael, and Michael, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the panel.
So here we are. At the start of this summit forum, I posed 4 questions that I was hoping folks would have an opportunity to think about and an opportunity to really cook on throughout the course of the sessions. How are institutions reaching new audience to market, sustain, and scale their rapid training offerings? How are microcredentials alleviating skills shortages and strengthening key sectors of the economy to support Canadian productivity? How are instructors incorporating innovative pedagogical practices and future skills into their microcredential programs to help learners navigate societal transformations? And finally, how are upskilling and reskilling initiatives enabling career advancement and transition at every stage of life? Over the past 2 days, we've had a fascinating window into the how, the why, the what, the where, and the when of credentialing in this space. And I think we've really painted an interesting picture of what the post-secondary ecosystem can start to look like when you have people who really, just notice the red light, give a darn about what we're here to do. And it's an inspiring opportunity to really be in a room and to be engaged with leaders who are so creative about who we are and what we do and why we do it. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time out to engage meaningfully and purposefully with this work, for taking the time to engage meaningfully and purposefully with this event. I would encourage you all, you'll have received by now a conference survey. Please fill that out. Please share your thoughts on the event. Please share your thoughts on what you thought really worked well. Please highlight the things that you'd like to see improved upon. The reason that this event is in its 8th year is because the feedback that the organization gets from you helps to shape the future of this space, of this event, and by definition, of our opportunity to collaborate on this work. I'm going to invite Robert up in a second to close us out. But I would like to, before I do that, thank once again our sponsors for this event. It really wouldn't have been possible without you, Robert. I'll leave it to you to name them. But I'd like to genuinely thank you all for taking the time out of your days. We're all busy. It is what it is. But taking the time out from your work to sit down and engage with this, and to sit down and really think about this. Because as we start to map out a future for our industry, it's the leaders in this room who are going to shape what our post-secondary sector becomes. So thank you very much, and Robert, I'll invite you up to close.
Thank you so much, Amber. Let's give him another round of applause for doing a great job hosting. I'm going to be super quick to say a farewell. I want to thank you all for attending. As Amrit said, you're the leaders that are going to build the systems that we need for tomorrow. And that's really, really important for you to remember. I do want to thank our sponsors, the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, FutureFit AI, our lead sponsor, partner on our Campus Exchange initiative that you'll see hit the newswire on Monday, CCI Learning, the Indigenous Institutes Consortium. Got a mouse pad from the Indigenous Institutes Consortium, which I didn't know I needed, but I'm glad that I did. Lightcast was here, Ontario Council on Articulation and Transfer, or ONCAT, and Pressbooks. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. Now, events like this don't just happen. A lot of people have come up to me and said, wow, great work, this is a great event. I literally just showed up. It's kind of my job. they're a result of a large amount of work by a huge amount of people. So I want all of the eCampus Ontario people that are here just to stand up. These are the eCampers that make things happen. Thank you very much. These are serious people doing serious work, but having a lot of fun while we do it. I get to work with these people every day, and they're pretty awesome, actually, including Matthew Simon Pillai, who is our Employee of the Month. I'm going to call on a few others. Michael Crowbook, who has been doing all the organization. Our communications team, Lutfi Adala, Dijoho Saizano, Paul Versbicki, and Cindy Lee. Thank you. Rizwan Kassam, Matthew Samanplay, I've already mentioned, but you're the Employee of the Month, so I'm going to say your name twice. Natasha Joban-Futra has been doing excellent work on supporting accessibility. And of course, Jason Northway Frank, who does all of our communications. So thanks to all the eCampers for being awesome. It's my pleasure to support you every day. So over the past couple of days, we've heard a lot about the macroeconomic context to micro-credentials. I kind of like that. I'm probably going to use that on the LinkedIn at some point in time soon. We've heard about the exponential crisis that we are all in. This is a crisis on top of a crisis on top of a crisis. We've also talked about the need to evolve our educational system to meet the changing needs of our society. And that's us. That's changing what we do. And Mary, I really appreciated your ending rejoinder, because I think it's really important for us to be curious and to make that change part of our work and the work that we do. We also heard a lot about orienting the educational system to the needs of society. Sometimes this is a controversial topic, right? What's the aim of education? Is it to make a person job ready or to make them a good citizen? Why are those two things mutually exclusive? They're probably two sides of the same coin. The point of this, though, that the imperative to do this work is very serious right now. And the imperative to do this work together is even more important and serious. This is our time to come together. It's our time to think big, to be bold. It's our time to lead. It's our time to be coordinated, as we were told yesterday, but also to coordinate and take the initiative to make some changes. I really like the focus on convening that Robert Greenwood was just talking about. I think that's super essential. I've been really heartened by all of the talk about collaboration over the last couple of days. We work on collaboration at eCampus Ontario all the time. That's what we do. We support all 53 Indigenous institutes, colleges, and universities. So collaboration it's in our DNA. And I just want to, Mary, come back to you. I think we need to decide to do the hard work about what it means to evolve our system. We've got, a pretty wicked problem. We are underfunded and overregulated. We need to figure out how we're going to get ourselves out of that box or out of the Gordian knot in order to do the work that we can do. As we heard yesterday from the ESDC folks, upskilling and retraining, that's a major component of meeting the threats that we are under. That's a tariff response, and this is our moment, really, to come together. I'm reminded of the cultural theorist Homi K. Bhabha. He said, the state of emergency is almost always the state of emergence. Now, we are not now, nor will we ever be, the 51st state. But this is our state of emergency, and it is also our state of emergence. This is our opportunity before us. I think we've heard over the past 2 days about practical ways we can stand up micro-credentials to benefit learners and employers. We've heard about the importance of labor market information. We've heard about how labor market information doesn't work for some people, like Indigenous communities, the economics of place, resilient regional economies. All of these things are super important. And I've really enjoyed listening and learning from and with all of you over these last couple of days, so I just want to thank you again for that. I want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights. Together, we're creating accessible and affordable learning, and it's our job to do the hard work of designing that for all learners from all ages and stages of life. Now, we might not know what new trade or tariff threat is going to emerge tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, but we know this: we are stronger when we work together. So thank you all for joining us at the 2025 Micro-Credential Forum. Really, really appreciate you coming out and being part of the community, and we're very pleased to support that community. Thank you for being a builder of futures. I wish you a farewell and a safe commute home.